This is my life with albinism.
Now, this is my life with albinism.
And this is my life with albinism.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the Life with Albinism podcast. We are here with our co host, Maya Warren, and we have a new guest today. We will let her introduce herself.
Hello, I am Shelby Garrison and I am from South Carolina and I am glad to be here with you all today.
Great, great. So, before we get into our topic, can you just briefly tell us how was living with albinism for you?
Living with albinism, basically coming up as a child, I knew I looked different from everybody else. It was just something I just didn't understand. With not being able to see that well and having to wear glasses with tint, wearing sunscreen, and just different aspects of that. It didn't really start to really bother me until I got maybe into like my teenage years, trying to find friends and basically fit in, and that's where the difficulties started.
Okay, okay. So, we have a special topic that we want to discuss today. So, today we're going to be discussing myths about albinism, and we're all going to give our opinion about these myths, and we're all going to express whether they're true or not. So, I'm pretty sure you guys have all heard all different kind of crazy myths about albinism, correct?
Right.
Yep.
All right, so let's get started. We're going to start with some of the more obvious ones that we always hear. So this first one would be easy to debunk. So the first one is people with albinism are seen to have magical powers or have some kind of magic within their bones or blood. What do you guys think about that? And I'm sure you guys have heard of this before. What do you guys think about that one?
Definitely, I don't even believe in that. First of all, I do believe in my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and I will replace that with the Holy Spirit.
I
Definitely,
hear you.
Amen to that.
definitely, yeah.
Maya, what's your take on that?
I mean, I agree with her, but also like it just I hear this a lot in terms of like talking to people with albinism who are from like other parts of the world. And I've heard it here as well in different contexts. And it's not only ignorant, but it's kind of it's very lazy and it is just another attempt to justify mistreating another human being.
It's funny that you call it lazy because that's actually what it is. It's pretty much being too lazy to figure out the science behind albinism and why it comes about. So you see something different and you're like, oh, it must be magic. You know what I mean? So it's like being too
Mm-hmm.
lazy to figure out the genetic science behind it, you know? I
Mm-hmm.
agree with you guys. Of course, it's just totally ridiculous. That's a myth like that must have occurred in the beginning before they knew what albinism even was, and they just kind of just threw that out there. Okay, so moving forward, here's an interesting one. All people with albinism are white. What do you guys think about
Oh
that?
my gosh.
Oh wow.
Oof. Okay, so I guess I can go first. I don't. This one, it's a button pusher because growing up, I had to fight for my blackness, and
Well, now to be fair, I don't think they meant white
Yeah.
as in race. I think they meant white as in
yeah,
all people with albinism have white skin.
I hear you. But I'm saying, like, growing up, I had to fight for my race, and one of the comments I would get from people who are also African American was like, "Oh, but your skin is so white." And for the life of me, I was like, how do I reconcile this? And so I don't think that our skin is quote unquote white. Because if you look at a white piece of paper, I'm not that bright, but I always refer to myself as a highlighter because I do know that my skin is very fair.
Right. Okay. So I'll say to this, and then we'll let Shelby also answer. So I would say for the most part, right? Like most there are different types. First of all, there's different types of albinism. So no, not all albinos are pale. If that's what they meant by white, if they meant by like pale skin, white skin, whatever the case, not all albinos are the same. Not everyone with albinism has the same type, and there actually are. Maya, you probably know the term for it. There are other types of albinism in which they are
Yeah.
slightly melanated. They have slight melanin
Yeah,
in their skin and
there's
in their hair. So their hair is like brown and their skin is like slightly tan.
mhm. There's ocular albinism where that can occur. I see that mostly with ocular albinism, where albinism just affects the eyes, and someone may have a typical amount of pigmentation. And then there's the other end of the spectrum with Hermansky-Pudlak syndrome, another form of albinism where the individual may be even more fair than someone with oculocutaneous albinism.
Right, right, right. Shelby, what's your comments to that?
My comments to that, I would say coming up, oh my God, a lot of people was curious about my skin. I would say I drew mostly people to me. Um, some people knew as far as like well, I say maybe white people, um, they automatically knew what I was. Um, I would always have people tell me that I was gorgeous. Just on a day-to-day basis. Just like coming up and going like elementary school and things like that. So I would even kind of fit in, call myself fitting in with them, because I've kind of always maybe felt included. But as for like my own race as Black African American, it was kind of hard because I just never forget. I was on a school bus, and this guy, he said, if I look that ugly, I wouldn't turn around. And this was a Black guy, and this was in my own race.
Wow.
But I've never really experienced that coming from a white person, because they always told me my skin was, pretty, So that's where I
Hmm.
come. Yeah.
I
Okay.
had a similar type of scenario happen to me in high school. I was checking out of the library, and the guy behind the library was another student sitting next to, I guess, like his fellow classmate. And he looks at me, and then he turns to his classmate. He's like, "Did you know that white people can't make Black babies, but Black people can make white babies?" Yeah. Yeah. I left, I had to show some restraint. I have a reputation and I didn't want to ruin it in that moment. But
I don't know if you this is a little bit off topic, but since you mentioned it, I don't know if you
mhm.
guys noticed, but did you guys know that that a Black couple can actually have a white child that is actually not albino but just actually white? It's like a super 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 rare occurrence that happens, almost
Mm,
kind of like a phenomenon. But did you guys know that that actually happens sometimes?
I didn't know that.
no, but
Yeah,
I
if
don't
you
think
ever
this
so
individual knew about that.
okay, so of course this is off the record because this is off topic, but when you guys ever get the chance, go to YouTube and type in Black parents have white baby not albino. Type that in and you're going to be very very shocked because it actually happens. But it makes sense though, because being that African Americans were the first humans on earth, we have all genetic we have all genetic possibilities, whereas white people do not, because they are a result of adaptation to race and climate over years. But again, that's another topic. So let's get back on to the topic here. Okay. So we're going to move on to the next myth. Okay. So the next myth is this one is a very, very weird one, but I've seen this myth when I Googled myths about albinism, it came up numerous times. Having sex with a woman with albinism can cure HIV or AIDS. I'm going to let the women give their opinion of this one. Have you guys even ever heard something this ridiculous? Off with you. Okay, so Shelby, have you ever heard of that myth, and what are your thoughts on
I've never heard of that myth. Um, I just think it's just maybe downright just um obnoxious. Mm,
it? You
I
said
couldn't,
obnoxious.
yeah, I just couldn't, I couldn't even imagine that. That's where we have to kind of, kind of clean up our minds and kind of head in the right direction, with clean thinking.
Okay.
I agree. And I think what I was trying to say earlier is that, again, like the first question, it's lazy, but um, given that so much of certain cultures within the African diaspora have a history of uh, these types of notions, it's not necessarily surprising because true to human nature, when something comes along that is different, we got to justify how we treat the thing or the person that is different. And so it's just another excuse to dehumanize someone to take advantage of them.
Hmm. And I think that what you're saying is so true because I feel like that's exactly what it is. It was like maybe that was just their excuse to dehumanize people with albinism. So, God forbid, a lot of women with albinism may have been taken advantage of because of that myth being out there. So imagine being in a country where you don't have much science and that kind of myth floats around and you do have women with albinism. It's kind of like that green light to mistreat them, so when you put it that way, I totally understand, and I think it's horrible, absolutely horrible. um Another myth that I see here on the list, it says that people with albinism are a result of incest. Another yet ridiculous, just ridiculous myth. And what do you what are you guys thoughts on that? I think for this particular myth, I think this might have been thought to be the case simply because having albinism is pretty much of a genetic phenomenon at first, before science advanced and things like that. So they probably thought, okay, it had to be some kind of fault on the parents to have this kind of a birth defect. Maybe that's how this one came about. What are you guys' thoughts about that?
Um, I think that is just downright this is heartful, cold because we are all unique. Um, we are created in the image, of God, and this was how He saw fit, for us. Even though we don't understand everything, we don't get it right then and there. Society has took things and just twisted it and has implanted different ideas and and um, different scenarios and things like that into people's minds, and um, it takes a lot of maturity and growing up to, like, say, hey, wait a minute, stop, let me research this, let me get a better understanding of what it is, because I don't know. But instead, some just choose to kind of go with the flow and go with everybody else and what else they think or so.
Okay.
Yeah,
Maya,
I
any
think
comments on that one?
Yeah, my thought process immediately goes back to um two things. One, the idea of Eurocentric ideologies shaping some of the way that these rumors, these very old rumors about albinism get shaped and passed around. And when you think about the history of the world, we didn't really start, assessing and learning how to empathize and really research for ourselves in terms of world history until like maybe the last 100 150 years, if that. And so given that, you have people who are making, in the past, making up forms of pseudoscience and theories
Mm.
that really don't amount to anything. And while a lot of those narratives have died down, there are still some that find their way through the cracks for some reason. And this seems to be one of those. And I think if someone approached me and they were like, hey, is albinism a result of this? I have no problem debunking that.
Right,
But
right.
but as someone who doesn't have albinism, you have to know that that is a deeply personal question, and it's something that you probably retained just from your upbringing, your culture, and all those things.
Right, right. Okay. So now on to the last two, which are myths that are not as ridiculous. Second to last one, people with albinism cannot go outside during daylight. I'll speak first on this one. So this one is probably one of the more reasonable myths. Of course, it's still ridiculous, but it's one of the more reasonable ones. Yes, we do have an issue with sunlight, but to be fair, for us, it typically has to be pretty hot outside for it to be of the magnitude to where we would be like, okay, I really don't want to go outside today. You know what I mean? Or
Mhm.
also the UVA, the level of the UVA rays for that day also matters. So for majority of us, it matters down to temperature and the level of the UVA rays to where if it will begin to irritate our skin right away to where we're like, oh no, I know I'm going to get burnt. I need to go back inside. That's as far as I can go. But just regular old daylight, of course not. Of course, that's not an issue. Of course, we can walk outside in the sun, even if it is extremely hot. We just may not want to because we want to avoid sunburn. But it's completely different from saying we cannot be outside in the daylight. What are you guys' feedback or thoughts on that myth?
Um, One, I will say that I love the outdoors. I spend time fishing, kayaking. If you go on my YouTube channel, you'll see me outside by some body of water at some point. And having the obstacle of being fair skinned, it poses a challenge sometimes because you have to be like, okay, use wisdom. Is having fun better than being burnt to a crisp? You know what I'm saying? Uh, and so instead of being rotisserized, I have to make the conscious effort to say, okay, let me protect my skin so that I can live to fight another day, not be itching and have to pour on the aloe vera. You know what I'm saying? You get to the point where you weigh the options. And so for people who think people with albinism can't go outside, it's absurd. We can go outside. We just have to take precautions. Just like if
Right. There
someone
we go.
who has asthma needs an inhaler, they could still be physically active, but they just need an inhaler.
Right. Shelby.
Right. I definitely agree. We are more than welcome to go outside and, get fresh air and just be renewed and, clear your mind. But definitely, I actually have, coworkers who, ask me, about my skin and, you know, about having shades and my sunscreen and things like that. So it's definitely like a reminder. I definitely have like a big floppy hat that I wear occasionally outside. But yeah, of course, we can go outside. We just have to definitely limit the amount of time that we are out.
Um, Now I'll ask you guys this quick question. Now this is what I do, right? And I'll ask if you guys do the same. Me personally, I have a very low tolerance for heat, especially heat from like the sunlight, you know. I actually absolutely hate when it's like extremely hot outside. So for me personally, if I look at the weather channel on my phone before I step outside and it says like above 90 degrees, I will find a way to stay in the house that day. I'll be like, hey, okay, I'm not going out today. I'll work out at home. I'll eat whatever's at home. I'll try not to leave the house on a day where it's over 90 degrees. Is that the same thing for you guys, or do you guys love the heat or something like that?
I'm gonna be 100 with you. Like me and the heat, it's not it. Like that, the summertime is my least favorite time of the year in terms
Facts.
of temperature. I was born in the winter. I can hang with the cold. You can put on more clothes in the cold. Summertime, you can't even take off your skin and be cool enough. So I find it to be something that I try to tolerate as best as I can, but if I look at that UV index and it says an 8 or 9, I'm staying in the car, I'm staying indoors, I'm finding some shade, I'm doing what I got to do to not be burnt.
What about you, Shelby?
Um, Definitely I don't have a really have a tolerance for it. Um, Although I do work with children. My major was early childhood education. So we are required to take the kids outside. However, in our classroom, if we just see fit, um, that the children are just overheated and they're kind of cranky, we will go in a couple of minutes earlier. As for me, I position myself on the playground, and that's definitely in the shade where I can see the children. um, I do move about accordingly so that I could supervise them, but most definitely, I am in the shade and I do have my sunscreen on.
Okay. All right, all right. So now we're gonna go to the last myth, and then we're gonna wrap things up. So last myth is people with albinism are a result of two different races. Okay, so meaning the myth is that somebody who has so that two people, white and black, can result in having is the result of having an albino child. What are you guys' thoughts on that? I guess I'll start first. Again, I think lazy in the aspect of science. That's somebody who's just not trying to take the time. That was just probably a myth created before they really wanted to take the time to figure out the genetic side of albinism. Obviously, it's a situation where one or more parents has to carry the albinism trait. Um, so yeah, that's another one that's kind of ridiculous to me. What are you guys' thoughts on that? We'll start with you, Shelby.
Um, I just I just think, as I was saying earlier, that, people, they just tend to like, me, it's about me, 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 instead of, taking time out, for the interests of others. Just, maybe asking questions, even out of curiosity. Um, and just doing much, research, just taking the time out and, just having the heart for others and, just wanting to learn someone else.
Maya.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. And, to that point, because albinism is a recessive gene that has to be carried by both the mother and the father, um, regardless of what ethnicity those two people are, if they have those traits and God says they want a child with albinism, like here we go. And it may happen that way. I have friends who are um, Afro Afro American. So on one parent was Puerto Rican, the other parent was black. They both had the gene for albinism, so he ended up with albinism. It wasn't like just because two people of different races met, they had
Right.
albinism. They had to specifically have the gene. And, it goes back to what we've been talking about the whole time, laziness. And unfortunately, even with the influx of all this information that we have, we've gotten lazier. And it's much easier for people to put you in a box and say it's this or that instead of it could be this as well as that.
Right. So then lastly, guys, I want to give Shelby the opportunity to express all of her social medias. Where can they find you? Where can they follow you? Go ahead.
I'm Shelby Garrison, and you can find me at Bay Martin at 86 on Instagram. Um, Also, you can email me at shelbymartin46@yahoo.com. If there's any questions you may have, any concerns or anything that you may want to discuss, I'll be glad to accept emails and questions, etc.
All right. Now we want to thank you guys for joining the show today. Thank you for discussing these myths. And I'll just give a last conclusion to all of this. Please understand these myths did not come from me or anyone that I've spoken to or heard from. These were specifically myths that I found on Google. So if you go to google.com and type in myths about albinism, this is where I pulled this list from. And keep in mind, most of these myths were probably created or came about way before science was advanced, way before genetic understanding was advanced. So pardon the ignorance. And I don't even think that this is much of myths that people still carry on and believe to this day. Maybe in very isolated countries, maybe, but that's where this list came from. So we do want to apologize for the ignorance of these myths. 99% of all of the ones that we discussed today were inaccurate. So again, guys, thank you for coming on today and discussing these topics. I do greatly appreciate it. So subscribe to the channel, Life with Albinism. And if you want, we still do have shirts available for sale, the signature Life with Albinism shirts. Shelby is also wearing hers today too, so we appreciate that. She's definitely a supporter. All right, guys. Thank you, guys. Great episode.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye-bye.